I'm Stephanie Spear, press secretary for the campaign. I've enjoyed getting to know many of you and glad you could be here today. First, a few housekeeping rules. Everyone will be muted unless you're speaking. If you could right now, be sure that your name is listed as your first and last name and then your news outlet. Once we get to questions, I'll be referencing your name and your news outlet, so please make sure you update that right now. During the Q&A session, if you have a question, please raise your hand. And when I call on a reporter, your mic will get unmuted by our tech staff. And if you can please keep your questions concise and specific to ballot access. So we're going to start off today. It's an exciting day for us. We have an announcement we'll be making about ballot access today on this call that'll get press released as soon as this press briefing is over, and a lot of other ballot access details to share. First, I'd like to start off with a time-lapse video that shows our ballot access journey to date. So as you can see, we've been really busy and our momentum is very strong. We've surpassed all of our milestones for ballot access and are very excited to have Kennedy-Shanahan on all 50 state ballots and in the District of Columbia. I'd now like to introduce Robert F. Kennedy Jr., independent presidential candidate, who will give us some updates.
Very, very happy and very proud to announce this this milestone and this success. Today, we are announcing that we have sufficient signatures to get on the ballot in 8 more states: Alabama, Arkansas, Kansas, Massachusetts, Montana, North Dakota, Vermont, and Virginia. This achievement follows a similar achievement 2 days ago when we announced signatures in 9 states: Connecticut, Idaho, Iowa, Maine, Missouri, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. We now have sufficient signatures to get on the ballot in 42 states, and that's sufficient to win 480 electoral college votes. I want to begin by thanking this extraordinary effort by our volunteers. We have an army of volunteers, over 100,000 now, who have worked on getting ballot access for us. It was really a monumental effort. The rules, draconian and Byzantine rules that govern ballot access in the 50 states, were written by the Democratic and Republican Party to prevent competition, to make it insurmountable for a candidate for the independent candidate for the presidency to ever get their name on the ballot in all 50 states. And indeed, most of the members of the press, virtually all of the major press outlets, have been predicting since day one, since I declared my independence 8 months ago, that this could not be done, that we could never achieve this, that our campaign should not be taken seriously because we would never be on the ballot. And I think most of you who are journalists can go back and look in your journals and see those predictions. And like many of the other things that people have predicted about us during this campaign, we have been able to overcome impossible odds. I want to thank the 100,000 volunteers. They made an effort. I run into our volunteers as I travel across the country. These are people who, always surprise me. They're people who mainly I've never met before, who have devoted months and months of hard work to getting me on the ballot. It's very humbling. It's very touching. I met a giant man about 6'6" the other day in Nevada who said that he had lost 20 pounds over the past 3 days collecting signatures for me in the 117-degree heat. And in New Hampshire, I met many volunteers who participated in our effort to get on the New Hampshire ballot. I think we needed 2,500 signatures. We got 5,000 signatures in 4 days during a snowstorm when the volunteers had to persuade people walking on the streets in Concord and Manchester and Keene to stop, to take their gloves off, to write in a clear hand, because if they were shivering and their hand moved, then the efforts against us would invalidate that ballot. And they were able to do that. I was with the other day in Maine some of the volunteers who went and got our signatures validated in all 400 towns. They had to visit 400 towns and talk with the town clerk and get the town clerk to sign, to notarize the signatures from that particular town. So we needed volunteers to go to 400 separate towns in the state to collect signatures and then to get them certified by the town clerk. And it's a monumental logistical task that we've accomplished. No presidential candidate in history has ever gotten 1 million signatures. We have an extraordinary team. I want to particularly thank Nick Brana and Amaryllis Kennedy, who masterminded and orchestrated this. But our entire team are made up of people who gave their blood, sweat, and tears to make sure that we could accomplish this extraordinary feat. And they're people who are committed to our campaign of unifying our country. On July 12th, I gave a speech about America Strong and talked about how crises have always brought out the best in America and unity in America after 9/11, after the Boston Marathon bombing, after hurricanes and tornadoes and other crises in our country have always brought Americans together. And when we're together, we can accomplish anything. And the enemies of our country know that. And the people who want to exploit our country know that. And they are deliberately keeping us divided. And neither the Republican Party nor the Democratic Party nor the candidates, President Trump or Vice President Harris, have the capacity to end that division. My speech was the day before President Trump's attempted assassination, and I outlined a plan for a unity government, how I'm going to invite Democrats and Republicans in to my cabinet and people from other political parties to my cabinet to run the agencies and to involve them in a commission, a bipartisan commission to choose Supreme Court justices. This is very similar to what Abraham Lincoln did with his team of rivals, and where he brought Americans together at a time of the greatest division in our history, which was the American Civil War. I gave that speech the day before the assassination attempt, and for a moment after that assassination attempt, both political candidates at that time were talking about unity. But those aspirations for unity, for kindness, for compassion and understanding across the party lines have since then evaporated, and we're back to the name calling, the vitriol, the demonization of the other side. And as long as we're at each other's throats, we're not going to be able to accomplish anything as our country. Our country is going to continue to spiral in decline. We can reverse that decline. We have extraordinary resiliency, but a house divided cannot stand. And we need a candidate, finally, who is going to bridge that gap and bring Americans together. And at this moment, I'm the only campaign who has the capacity to do that. Oh, I want to thank again the team, and they forced us. They forced us to do something we should have never had to do. They forced us to bear this expense and to organize this tremendous effort. And it's put us at a huge advantage in the upcoming election because we now have 100,000 volunteers who are highly motivated, who are proven, who are battle tested, who are on the street, and we are now deploying them. We're pivoting and deploying them to voter identification projects, to get out the vote, to doing all the things that we need to do to have a ground army to win this election. Oh, again, I want to thank everybody on the team who was involved in this extraordinary accomplishment, and thank all the members of the press who came today. And Stephanie, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, lots of momentum and very exciting time. And the launching of our America Strong platform is going to take us to the end. So thank you so much. I'd love to introduce now Nicole Shanahan, our independent vice presidential candidate. Nicole, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Hello, members of the press. Thank you so much for joining us today. We couldn't be more excited to share our progress with you. We appreciate you following us on this journey so much. You know, in every effort central to a campaign, a presidential campaign, we've had significant handicaps compared to Biden, Harris, and Trump. We've had them in debate access, the Presidential Debate Commission not being able to run these debates, or a truly objective party that is not able to see through polling manipulation. It's been, you know, we've been up against a lot, and we'd love to see Bobby on the stage this come September. We'd love your support with that. Any advocacy we'd be so grateful for. We've had fundraising caps. The max donation to our campaign has been $6,600. And so we've been doing this financially handicapped. Ballot access handicap is the largest handicap. It's where the majority of our funds have gone. And I have to say, I had no idea how difficult it was for third-party candidates to access ballots in this country. I always assumed that we were an open democracy that encouraged as many qualified voices to speak. And I have to say that ballot access has given all of us an opportunity to come together to wear multiple hats. I've had the opportunity to cross the country and meet our volunteers, to meet our ballot access team. I'm on the phone with Nick Brana almost daily. I've gotten to know my notary incredibly well because every document we've had to sign multiple times because there's so many nuanced rules that if we have a notary stamp in the wrong place, they'll reject it. We have these very tight deadlines that seem somewhat arbitrary. And so we've had people flying across the country trying to deliver these documents and affidavits, and we have to do it state by state, and every single state is different. Every piece of paperwork is different. Every requirement category and where you sign and what address box you fill in is different. You know, media coverage. I know that the media, you've been under incredible pressure this election cycle. It's been unprecedented what we've seen over the last 2 weeks. And I want to commend you for staying flexible and open and hopeful, because I will say, you know, 51% of Americans now identify as independents. And it's a wonderful opportunity as well, I think, for the media to really take an objective look at where the United States is. It is an unprecedented election in so many ways. And if there's ever been an opportunity for a third-party candidate to have success, it is this election. And it will be truly groundbreaking, especially since we have approached this as a unity ticket. We're not trying to create a new breakaway third party. We are here to unite the country in every way imaginable, from, looking beyond identity politics to looking beyond vitriol and name calling and, smear campaigning. For one, we don't have the resources to smear campaign. That's a multi-million-dollar endeavor. And we don't do that. We found other ways to run a very, very gracious campaign. So I think that it's just been the most heartwarming, wonderful experience to find other Americans across the political spectrum who have come together and united. There are two categories in particular I've spent a lot of time with of voters, moms, as well as immigrants and children of immigrants. Just this last week, Amaryllis and I were talking just now about how so many children of immigrants have come to our campaign and have said, thank you. Thank you for giving us a third option. We're seeing what's happening around the world. We're seeing what's happening in this country. We're concerned. And we see the culture and the grace and the American spirit embodied in your campaign, and we are grateful to you. So I just want to say thank you to all of our volunteers. One in particular who has been my guiding light since I joined the campaign. Her name is Kim Haynes. I had the opportunity to spend 2 hours with her yesterday, but Kim is one of our campaign leads in Hawaii. And the week that I joined the campaign, I heard about Kim overcoming our first ballot access challenge here in Hawaii. She is a mom. She's a former pediatric chiropractor, and she went up against one of Hawaii's top attorneys to win our ballot access challenge. And I think of Kim every day when I'm out here and we are presented with a new and unknown challenge and a new and unknown hurdle, because we have to carry each other forward, and that is the nature of this campaign. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie now.
Thanks so much, Nicole. I just want to remind all the press, if you can please right now update your name with your first, last name, and then your news outlet. When we get to questions, I'll be calling on people who I know who they are. So if you can do that, that would be great. I am now thrilled to introduce Nick Brana. Nick is the campaign senior advisor and ballot access director who's been helping lead the charge on our journey to ballot access. Nick, I'll give you the floor.
Thanks so much, Stephanie, Bobby, Nicole, Amaryllis, everybody, Paul, Rossi, our amazing senior ballot access counsel, and everybody across the country that has participated in this truly monumental, historic effort to achieve ballot access across the country. I remember back in October was reminiscing as we were preparing for this very press conference with some of our fellow campaign leaders who are speaking here today, back in October planning this. And there was so many questions around whether we would be able to accomplish this, because I will tell you, having done it now, that independent ballot access is a labyrinth laced with a minefield. Oftentimes, the secretaries of state do not know their own rules. They will sometimes mislead you. Some are very helpful. They hadn't even produced the forms that were necessary until sometimes days or hours before we had to submit them. The amount of challenges is truly incredible, because this was not meant to be done. It was meant to be a barrier to any kind of challenge to the entrenched big money duopoly. And yet, thanks to the incredible work of more than 100,000 volunteers across the country. We are indeed doing it. And I want to share a little bit more to illustrate what exactly that has meant. The level of complexity of ballot access as an independent is astonishing. Every state is different. So you have 51 little mazes laced with minefields. You have differences in paper size, the signatures, how the printed name has to be included, whether it's required, the address, the birthday, the date on the petitions themselves. Some require attestations, others declarations, others notarizations that have to be done perfect. And each one is slightly different in every state. And people have to be trained. Your petitioners, volunteers have to be trained in order to get them just right. You have to submit, when you submit the signatures, it's not as easy as, oh, here's a stack of paper. You turn it over to the Secretary of State. You often have to sort it in a very particular way, by county, by circulator, by declaration. You have to number them often as well. Sometimes you have to number them with the final number as well. So 1 out of 1,000, 2 out of 1,000, 3 out of 1,000. You got to know exactly how many there are from the very start. If you make a mistake, you're screwed. You have to bind them. You have to clip them. There are county turn-ins in some states. You got to turn it in, of course, to the state in the end. There's different validation windows for the county turn-ins when you hand it to them before they give it back to you when they validate the signatures. In some states, we've turned into 100 towns or counties before we have received the signatures back to turn them into the states. For electors is like an entire mini ballot access operation within itself. You have to vet, interview, ensure disaffiliations. Every state has a different party disaffiliation date. Sometimes you have congressional district distributions. Sometimes you have alternates. And then, of course, oftentimes things have to be notarized. And you have multiple forms per elector to submit to the state by exactly the deadline. The number of signatures required per state is heavily lopsided towards a few states, as you can see here: California, Florida, Texas, North Carolina, New York, Arizona, Indiana. Early on, one of the strategies that we adopted that was very successful was either forming or seeking party ballot lines in some of these states like California and Florida that have gigantic signature requirements. And that allowed us to save hundreds of thousands of signatures that we would have needed to collect otherwise. And yet still, as Bobby said at the top of the call, we needed to collect 1 million signatures nationwide, even cutting our signature total about in half with political parties strategically in certain areas. Here's a window into our ballot access data operation. You can see here, this is a Gantt chart that we created with the different dates in every single state's deadline and petitioning window from when they open to when they close across the country. And so this is part of how we wrapped our heads around the ballot access challenge to tackle it in a way where we were always allocating resources at the appropriate state that needed them. This spreadsheet from which I pulled this, our main ballot access spreadsheet, you can see here how many fields it has because we're in CW-CXCV. So there are hundreds of fields in these spreadsheets because there are hundreds of variables. Early on, we started off by dividing the country into 5 different national field regions. We have a phenomenal field team led by Will Boothby, along with 5 different regions here. As you can see, the Northeast, the South, the Midwest, the Southwest, and the West. And we did this also, part of the strategy around doing this was grouping the regions around a particular heavy so that we would have people volunteering in a particular region, helping out in some of the states that are easier, and then focusing their attention on a California, a Texas, a Florida, in New York, when those states came up that have particularly high signature requirements. This is where we were just a few days ago on Sunday, 392 electoral votes. And this is where we are now, 480. So I'm just going to show that again because I'm so proud of that. This is what the map looks like now in terms of where we have finished. The scale of the effort is really impossible to convey. But I hope those photos that played while Nicole was speaking gives a small taste of what's been done across the country to pull this off. This week alone, in the past couple days, Monday and today, Wednesday, we have completed the petitioning in Alabama, Arkansas, Kansas, Massachusetts, Montana, North Dakota, Vermont, and Virginia. And we have submitted signatures in Connecticut, Idaho, Iowa, Maine, Missouri, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, West Virginia. And we were certified in Alaska, Indiana, and Nebraska. That brings us up to a total of 10 states where we've completed petitioning, 19 where we have submitted the signatures, and 13 where we have been certified, adding up to 42 in total. Here are a few of the certification letters that we're getting: Alaska, Indiana, Minnesota, Nebraska, as an example. And every time we get one of these, we share them around the team and we celebrate. The Kennedy campaign, the Kennedy-Shanahan ticket, is the most successful independent campaign in decades. We have collected more signatures than any candidate in American history. We've raised about $52 million, unprecedented for an independent in the age of the internet. We have more than 115,000 volunteers, more than a million, I think it was up to 11 million real debate views. And we have a perfect record of defeating the legal challenges. Sharing some more photos here. And I believe that is the conclusion of our slideshow, except for this, one more thing to share. This right here, which is a little bit of an overview of the active challenges and the legal challenge victories, which I will leave to our Senior Ballot Access Counsel, Paul Rossi, and I'll hand it back to you. Or I'll hand it to Paul, I think. I think that was our.
Thank you, Nick. Yep.
Yeah, well, thank you, Nick. Nick has done a fantastic job, as has everybody on this team. As the person in charge of sort of providing the rules to Team Kennedy to navigate through these. I mean, the minefield is absolutely correct. You know it's a difficult area when the state officials themselves don't know their own rules, which is a bit surprising because, you know, presidential campaigns come every 4 years. You would expect there would be natural institutional knowledge in the secretaries of state and the boards of elections. But very often, especially very early on, they didn't know their own rules and were unable to convey it. And they are relying on statutes which are so opaque and so Byzantine on purpose by the Republicans and Democrats to make it almost impossible to decipher. So I want to thank the team for having the patience to understand the rules, take every rule very seriously, and then take those rules out into the field and successfully collect 1 million signatures, and also to the point where we are now we're going to have a 50-state ballot access for Team Kennedy. The 100,000 volunteers were critical to this procedure. Without them, we would not have gotten the 1 million signatures that we collected. And that has some real world application beyond simply getting the signatures, because what has happened very early on, the Democrats crowed that they had $100 million and they were going to knock us off every ballot in the state, in the nation, that they were going to challenge every state and challenge every petition. I think that's run into a problem and some roadblocks because of these 100,000 volunteers and because of these million signatures. Historically, the most direct route to kick somebody off of a ballot and to challenge a ballot access petition was to challenge the validity of the signatures. Because our volunteers and because our other partners followed the rules and were very careful with the voters and took this process very seriously, and were able to collect the number of signatures we collected, that our challengers, even with their $100 million, have not actually been able to challenge signatures. In many instances, we've collected 2, 3, and sometimes 4 times as many signatures necessary to get on the ballot. And they've been filed at a very high validity rate, so that the Democrats and those who are challenging us have not actually been able to challenge signatures. For instance, in Illinois, they were unable to challenge 33,000 signatures, and we only needed 25,000 to get onto the ballot. And at the end of the signature review, it ended up we had 43,000 valid signatures when we only need 25,000 to get on the ballot in Illinois. So the combination of the volunteer effort, the willingness to take these laws seriously, the team's patience in understanding what these rules were, and then taking those rules and implementing them into the field has been the hallmark and why we have been successful, and why that map has turned, thankfully, dark purple that Nick just showed you. It's a great relief that we have that map. And I want to say, the last 50 state independent ballot access candidate was Ross Perot. Ross Perot only had to collect 300,000 signatures to get ballot access in all 50 states. And the Ross Perot experience has really what prompted the legislatures in America, the Republicans and Democrats getting together to try to block any further 50-state ballot access independent candidate. And that's why we had to collect 1 million signatures. Because Ross Perot was successful, they thought they had imposed rules to ever prevent this from ever happening again. And they were right up until today. They've failed. And hopefully this won't prompt them to make the independent. And I'm hoping that the media rides herd on the state legislatures and the Republicans and Democrats not to try to go even further in keeping independent presidential candidates off the ballot. I would like to, if you would remember, back when the Ohio and Alabama was threatening not to put the Democrats on the ballot, they were crying up a storm saying, well, our voters have a right to have somebody to vote for on the ballot. Well, so do independent candidates. And I hope the media takes what the Democrats said when they were threatened to be kept off the ballot in the future to remind them what it felt like when they were threatened to have their ballot access denied. Independent candidates, independent voters, which now outnumber Republicans and Democrats combined, they have a right to find somebody on the ballot who they would like to vote for. And this campaign this year has achieved that for them. And I also want to highlight, because we have so many signatures, and because our challengers have not been able to effectively challenge ballot access petitions based on our signatures, they've simply thrown up a bunch of bogus, frivolous claims in an effort to try to throw spaghetti against the wall, hoping some judge somewhere buys their lousy arguments. So far, no judge has done so, and we're hopeful that no judge in the future will politicize their courtroom and adopt any of their frivolous arguments. And with that, I will turn it back to Nick or whomever. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Paul. Paul has been so instrumental in everything we've done ballot access related. So thanks for all your effort and work, Paul. I love working with you. Now I would like to turn this over to our campaign manager, Amaryllis Kennedy, who has led the charge for ballot access and has been, again, another so instrumental in getting us where we are. Amaryllis, please.
Thanks so much, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for being here. It makes me incredibly emotional to see that recap. Nick and Bridget and Paul and all of our incredible volunteers in the field. We were all together last fall, right? And we looked at those same slides, and a lot of those slides, you might have noticed those graphs are kind of shaped like a mountain. And I remember looking at them in October and saying to these guys that I'd had a law professor who worked against corruption, and he fought tooth and nail on every single case, but every so often he would tell a story about one where the moneyed powers were just so arrayed against him. And he said, you know what, Amaryllis, I realized it was a glass mountain, meaning there's no way that you can scale that. You can't climb a glass mountain. And I remember in October with this team looking at those mountainous graphs and those Gantt charts and all of the requirements in each of these, and wondering if it was a glass mountain. And here we are at the top of it, you know, fighting to restore our country as that city on the hill, and a moral leader and a unifying force in this country. And when I look at how we were able to do it, right? How are we able to scale a glass mountain? The answer is by unifying, by coming together. If we had said we only want Democrats, we only want Republicans, you're not welcome to volunteer with us, otherwise go back to your corner, there is no way we would have gotten this done. This is a testament to what we can achieve, the impossible, as Americans when we come together in service of our founding ideals, in service of the kind of country we want to leave our kids. You know, you think about antitrust legislation in this country and breaking up cartels. If you had the equivalent of a two-party system, if you had two behemoths that dominated an industry and that had common investors, by the way, and nobody else was allowed into that industry, that would be broken up in a moment. That is called a cartel. It's terrible for competition. It's terrible for the free market, terrible for our country. It's not how we work as a nation. And so to be able to come together and offer choice and competition in our public discourse has been an incredible feat that we would not have been able to accomplish without unity. And it, I think, really underscores the importance of this America Strong platform, of the idea of pulling leaders from all political parties and outside of political parties into the cabinet, into Supreme Court consultations, into legislative agenda. What does that look like for our country? And so when I turn now with this team to the 100 days that lie ahead of us, a little fewer now, and look at another task that everybody says is impossible, winning the White House as an independent candidate in contemporary America. And then I look at this 100,000 plus volunteer base we have out there, who, by the way, up until now have been entirely occupied with this vast, vast undertaking. So they have not been able to knock doors. They have not been able to go out and spread their love for this vision for America. They haven't been tabling or phone banking or doing any of the work that they are now able to turn and do. I think this other glass mountain that people say we have ahead of us, restoring unity in this country, and winning the White House, we're going to accomplish that too. And having done that as a country, we will be able to accomplish all the other glass mountains we have ahead, healing our national divisions, restoring long-term hope in our economy, when 70 plus cents of every income tax dollar is going to interest rates, right? These are vast undertakings. And improving our education system, improving our health of our nation and life expectancy and the health of our children. They all might be, said to be glass mountains, but I think what makes me so proud today watching this is having scaled one and having done it together, and that meaning that we can do it again and we're about to, and we look forward to holding the next conference on the other side of that. So thank you all for being here. One last thing that I don't know if everybody knows is that we validate every single signature before we turn it in. So to what Paul was saying, when we talk about having turned in X, 2X, 3X, 4X more than the signatures that we need in each of these states, it's not a like, hold your breath, will they get certified or not situation. We have gone through the exact certification process that the state uses for every single signature. We have excluded any signature that might fall foul of that process. So we already know. And we are really proud to be on all 50 state ballots and in DC, and look forward to making that announcement and sharing it with you soon. All right, I'll hand it back to you, Steph.
Yeah, thank you, Amaryllis. Beautifully said as always. So we're going to move over to our Q&A section. If you have a question, raise your hand. Again, I need to have your first and last name and outlet in order for me to call on you. So thank you so much. I'd first like to call on Seth Kelman of the Denver Post. And also just please keep your questions concise and about ballot access. Thank you. Seth?
Hi, thanks. Seth Clement from the Denver Post. Can you guys talk about your plans for Colorado? You've submitted signatures to appear as an unaffiliated candidate. The National Libertarian Party has submitted signatures to have their nationally nominated candidate as the Libertarian candidate here. The state Libertarian Party is saying they're still going to pursue having Kennedy as the Libertarian candidate here. So where are you guys at? Is your intention to go unaffiliated? Is your intention to have him on the ballot twice? What's the plan here?
Great question. Olivia, can you bring the whole team back?
Yep.
Great.
So I'm happy to jump in on that. And then Nick, if you have anything to add, we are incredibly proud to walk the walk of the America Strong platform, bringing all parties together for the good of our country in partnership with the Libertarian Party. We just announced a joint fundraising agreement with them this last week that is truly historic. For the first time, gives an independent candidate the potential to raise the same kind of individual donations as a Republican or Democrat. Up until now, we've been at a 100x disadvantage for each and every individual contributor in terms of the limit, along with these additional expenses of security and ballot access and so on. And so that is an extraordinary and historic moment for an independent and a minor party to come together in service of the country. And we plan to do more of that across the board. In terms of Colorado, we are independents first and are very proud to be on the ballot as independents. We're very interested in fusion voting and in defending the impact and benefit to democracy that fusion voting has. It used to be very ordinary in this country. It happened all the time. Up until now in many states, I mean, you look at in California in 2020, former President Trump, for example, was on the ballot as a Republican and AIP. There are some states, obviously New York and others, that explicitly allow it. And you see this almost every cycle. The Working Families Party in New York will co-sign the Democratic candidate, and they will run on both ballot lines. Likewise, the Conservative Party of New York will usually run the same person as the Republican Party. You saw former President Trump at the Libertarian Convention actually come and ask twice during his speech for the Libertarian nomination. Obviously, that was, one can presume that wasn't with the intention of giving up the Republican nomination. And these are really valuable things. Fusion voting is very valuable for our democracy because it allows within a limited number of parties. And we've just had a whole press conference about why the number of parties is so limited and candidates that you see on the ballot because of the process we just went through. But with those limited numbers, if you're able to vote for a candidate through one of two of their party lines, it actually gives voters a voice in, yes, I'm choosing this candidate, but I'm choosing them from a progressive point of view, or I'm choosing them from a centrist point of view. And it is a way of articulating how you would like them to govern and how you would like them to lead. So there's a lot to recommend fusion voting. We will explore it from a legal point of view in Colorado. We're independents first. It's great to have that additional, when you're charging the castle, and there are other parties out there who want to link arms and say, hey, we want to take on corruption too. You don't tell them to get lost and go home. We're very proud to stand with them. And if we're able to put RFK's name on the ballot with both independent and the Libertarian Party of Colorado, we'll be very proud to do so. So we'll have an answer to you as soon as we know the answer to that ourselves. And Colorado's Secretary of State knows the answer to that.
Thank you. Thank you, Amaryllis. I'd love to call on Isabella Ramirez of Politico.
Hi, yes, thank you. I wanted to ask because the Texas Democratic Party is challenging ballot access in Texas, specifically citing the fact that are claiming that some of the signatures are invalid and should be rejected. And so I was wondering whether the Kennedy campaign has had any conversations with the Texas Secretary of Office regarding the quality of these petition signatures and whether you have any update regards to the status of ballot access, particularly in Texas.
Paul, want to take that one?
Oh, you need to unmute, Paul.
I'm sorry, I'm a bit of a Luddite. I apologize. We have not yet been served with that complaint. It's not a complaint we're particularly worried about because we validated, as Amaryllis said, we have an independent validator who has gone through all the signatures before we file them, and he is historically within 1 or 2% of what is ultimately determined to be valid. We have over 80,000 extra signatures in Texas validated by the Secretary of State's office. So it's unlikely that Democratic challenge is going to succeed. It's just we have too many valid signatures in Texas for them to overcome. So we are confident in prevailing on that. We have not yet been served with that complaint. I look forward to that. I myself am going to be heading up that defense in Texas myself.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. Next up, I'd like to invite Audra Thibert of WIS Politics.
So much. I was just wondering if you guys are planning on turning in signatures by the August 6th deadline in Wisconsin and how many you guys are planning on turning in.
Nick, you want to
I can take that one. Yes, we do. We plan on turning in the maximum up to 4,000 signatures, which is double the valid count of 2,000 valid, and we'll be validating them as we do all of our signatures. And so, yes, we'll be turning that in either on the 5th or the 6th.
Great. Thank you. Next, Nicole Marcus of Washington Post.
I'll take this moment to just add that in Wisconsin, we have an amazing volunteer team that collected about 1,800 of them over a single week. So very proud of them.
Great. It looks like Nicole may have jumped off by.
No, she's there.
Okay.
Should be there.
Hi. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, you promised to be on all 50 states' ballots by the end of the summer. Just given the ongoing legal challenges, do you think that promise is still attainable?
100% yes.
Yeah, that's a definite yes. I think you're seeing us all nod our heads, but Paul, I don't know if you or Nick, one of the things that I think people don't realize is the states have until specific dates in their regulations and their statutes and guidelines where, they don't have to publish their certification letter until that time. And it's very clear that those who are not Kennedy supporters or supporters of independent politics, are waiting until the very last minute because any additional day where there's uncertainty about the fact that Kennedy will be on every ballot, is one day fewer where a voter might be paying attention because they think that though that's where their heart lies, they're not going to have that option. And so the delays in certification are not in any way related to actual concerns over signatures. They're just using the maximum of the time allowed. And the vast majority of states, those deadlines are in August. A handful are in very early September. This is why, for example, all of the presidential debates up until this year have always been in September, because states have until that time to do their certifications. And for that reason, the notion of ballot access as a criteria for debate has been is absurd before states have to actually certify, as we saw with the CNN debate. So as soon as it's Nicole, right? As soon as those certifications come for each and every state, you'll get that confirmation, and a handful of them will probably wait until the last minute if their deadlines are in early September. But we will have certainly already submitted our signatures in each of those states. So
yep.
Yes.
But bottom line, will be on every state's ballot and the District of Columbia. We're ahead of all of our benchmarks, and are looking forward for that celebration day. Next up, Sam Jenish from Baltimore Sun.
Hi, thank you. I was just wondering if you could address the status of the Maryland signature gathering, and if how many, and when that might be submitted before the Monday deadline.
Shout out to Josh Mazer, our incredible Maryland lead. Wow, what a force of nature. Nick, do you want to field that one?
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll be submitting that ahead of the Monday deadline, probably right on Monday. We have, as in every state, validated more than enough signatures, included about a 20 to 30% valid buffer in the state. And so we're ready to turn that in. In Maryland, you also, it's unique in that you have to turn in a number of the forms, candidate forms, prior in July, prior to the actual signature turn in. So we've turned in most of the rest of the paperwork, and we'll be completing it out with the petition on Monday.
Thank you. Next, Jeff Louderback of Epoch Times.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thanks. And I know you're talking about the extensive resources for ballot access efforts and then fighting challenges. So when you reach 50 states and DC ballot access, how will the campaign strategy shift?
Well, I mean, it already has in each of the states where we've turned them in, right? So I've shared on a few of our team Zooms. My mom is a really big fan of all of the old ancient literature, and she always points out that in the classics and all the classical poetry, the obstacle is always put in the hero's journey to actually give them something they need to succeed. And that is really how we have thought of ballot access. It has been an enormous burden and nuisance at times, but it forced us to put together a county by county, state by state ground game that it certainly has never existed in independent politics in my lifetime. I mean, even hearing the establishment campaigns recently talking about, having 2,000 staff and 2,000 volunteers. Well, we have 100 staff and over 100,000 volunteers. And if we hadn't, we wouldn't have been able to achieve this. And so as each of the turn-ins happen, we give people a breath, right? Go home, be with your families, be in nature for a week, and be proud of yourself. And then it's hit the ground running, door knocking, tabling, voter registration. One of the things that marks our campaign is being a voice for people who have not participated in this larger and larger balloon of wealth that's gone to a smaller and smaller sliver of the population. And that means young voters. It means voters who earn under less than $100,000. It means non-college educated voters who are concerned about getting a job and getting in a home. Many of our key cohorts are thought by received political wisdom to not vote, and many aren't registered. And everyone has said, why are you speaking to these people? They won't vote, because they come at this with real cynicism. And our answer is, if they vote, we can actually build a government that will serve them. And if nobody ever talks to you, why would you turn up and vote? So it's a vicious cycle. And for us, making sure that we are giving people, whether it's involving states that are outside of the swing state math, because it shouldn't be that if you don't win the zip code lottery and only live in 20 counties across the country, you're the only people that your leaders are accountable to every 4 years. Everybody else is just out of luck. So whether it's geographic or it's demographic or it's economic, we are really restoring this political process for the people. And I think that piece of it is underscored by saying we have no donations. We will never outmoney our adversaries. They're funded by massive corporations, but we can outpeople them. And that's what we've been doing. That's how we got on the ballot in all of these states. And it is also how we will spread the word, make sure that all of these people who may not have been registered or may not have seen any value in voting before because they thought left wing, right wing, same bird, never done anything for me, especially young people. I mean, they don't remember a time before 9/11, before the financial crisis, the forever wars, lockdowns, mandates. It doesn't matter if it's blue or red in Washington, it's bad news for them. And they have no long-term loyalty to this system that has done nothing for them other than rack up over $30 trillion of debt, as though they just open their mailbox when they turn 18 and get a credit card bill for over $30 trillion, and they didn't make one single one of those charges. And too bad. So they have no loyalty to this, and it's time to get them registered, and it's time to get them voting so that they can get the country they deserve. And that is what all of these volunteers are going to be doing now that they're done getting signatures.
Thank you, Amaryllis. Next up, Jeff Amy of Associated Press.
Yes, good afternoon. Mr. Rossi, would you be able to address the legal challenge that is pending in Georgia, which alleges in some detail that you have submitted your petitions in the wrong form?
Paul, please unmute.
Sorry. Yeah, it's one of those sort of throwing the spaghetti at the wall kind of thing. The petitions are on the right forms. They've also made the allegation that the presidential electors didn't pay a filing fee. Well, there is no filing fee in Georgia for presidential electors. So it's one of those challenges which, because they can't challenge the signatures, they've made allegations which are simply not correct at law. I mean, there's nothing more I can expound on.
I will add something to that.
They're not valid. They're just not valid challenges. Go ahead, Nick.
When you states will not accept the filing if it is incomplete. No state will accept the filing if you do not have, for example, the filing fee that is required. So it is on its face ridiculous, in addition to not being required by statute.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Paul. Next is Matt Majuri of Messenger Papers.
Am I on?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Quick point of personal privilege. Just want to appreciate Mr. Kennedy's visit to Holbrook, Long Island, Suffolk County back in May. It's very rare that we get presidential candidates here, and especially Holbrook, which is like the flyover country. So we appreciate that. Question, I guess, is more technical. Obviously, you have a ton of challenges. You're talking about how every state is different. Obviously, Nevada has been back and forth because they allege that since Nicole Shanahan wasn't on the ticket, then the signatures aren't valid. What would you say if you could, I guess, quantify what would the toughest state has been so far to get ballot access on? If you could even, I'm sure all of them have been somewhat equally difficult, but if there's one that you could single out, I guess without casting any
I mean, it's
political
got to be New
aspersions.
York, right, guys? Yeah,
I figured.
145,000 signatures in 45 days, something like that.
I figured.
Yeah, I mean, they told us at the beginning, we were putting the spreadsheet together, don't even put New York on there. You're going to be a write-in in New York. There's no two ways about it. It's impossible.
Wow.
You remember that, Nick? And,
Yeah.
we said it's not impossible with people, and we were right. But that was an enormous team effort. Will Boothby, our national field director, who's not on here, really was the architect of that on the ground and just did an extraordinary job.
We brought in many of our staff from across the country because it took, just to give a brief preview of some of the challenges that New York has that are unique. First of all, it has one of the shortest windows in the entire country, 6 weeks. It combines that 6-week window with a 45,000 ballot signature requirement. And then it adds on top of that a number of different provisions that are able to strike entire petition sheets or forms. Like, for example, any circulator who signs for a different presidential candidate's petition has all of their signatures invalidated. So it even creates an incentive to try to sabotage the petitions by getting circulators to sign other petitions. And then after collecting the signatures, it requires an enormous amount of processing, correcting the towns and hamlets, because the voter file, unlike in any other state, which we use to validate all of the signatures, does not actually match the fields that are required on the petition form. So there is really no way of validating it in a traditional sense, and it takes an enormous amount of work to individually process every single signature and look up their towns and hamlets to make the connections. So it was a humongous challenge. We have more than double the valid number of signatures required that have been certified by the New York State Board of Elections now. So we're incredibly proud of that.
And I just want to jump in too, because I remember the day Jill Stein submitted her New York signatures. They submitted well over the 45,000 signature requirement, but they didn't submit enough of a buffer as we did. And the disappointment that comes with that is so enormous. My heart really went out to the Green Party and Jill Stein. And, I think that this is something that, we've continued to expect unfair treatment. We've hedged it by 2-3x wherever we can. And that is the nature of this campaign. We expect to get unfair treatment. We anticipate it. We expect it to be egregious. I think that's really sad. I think that we have to highlight there's a bit of devastation around the fact that our democracy, in order to succeed, you have to anticipate certain amounts of injustice, incompetence, irregularity. But I have to commend our team for doing that with our heads held high.
Absolutely. All right, we have time for one more question from Oren Oppenheim of ABC News.
Hey there. I want to quickly ask first about a specific state. I'd heard that in Iowa, the Iowa Secretary of State office said that the party certificate with signatures wasn't accepted because it didn't have elector pledges. Is the campaign resubmitting? What's the plan there? And then more broadly, you guys are talking about ballot access, 50 states in DC and the Electoral College votes. What states do you think you can win?
I can answer the first part of that. We're submitting the elector pledges. That's correct. We'll be doing that likely on Friday or Monday, and that will be completing the filing there.
And on path to victory, we feel very strongly that once ballot access is established across the board, you look at Ross Perot and the exit polls. are pretty heartbreaking, right? You have low 30s I mean high 30s and low 40s of people who said if the polls had said he could win, I would have voted for him, and he would have been he would have been president. And so we have had the same challenge around ballot access. There is every day, all of us on this campaign get someone who comes up and is like, God, me and my whole family would vote for you, but you're not going to be on the ballot in our state. And we say, we already are, or yes, we will. But we have upwards of 70% in our polling across the board of people who don't believe we'll be on enough ballots to even get to 270. And that has been the media narrative. And I understand it. It's a new process. Most journalists today have not seen an independent candidate achieve what we have. It hasn't happened in 3 decades. But I think that more of the same, an incumbent, we're basically running against 2 incumbents at a time where, with all of the things that this country disagrees on, the one thing we all agree on is things are not going in the right direction. We have too much division. Life is not affordable. And we need a leader who is going to actually bring us back together in service of restoring our middle class, restoring our hope, moonshots, unity, all of the things that we know we are, and that quiet voice inside of us that speaks out and says, couldn't we be doing this differently? And the answer is a resounding yes. And we hear it from the moment we wake up in the morning and until we fall exhausted and proud to serve this campaign into bed every night on the road across all 50 states. So we'll be hard at work, and I'm sure we'll have another one of these soon. It turns out to be a great format, actually, Steph. It's really nice to be able to answer questions, and I know you all are all across the country to be able to join from anywhere. So I think we'll be doing more of these. Oh, now you're muted, Steph.
One final word from our independent presidential candidate.
Well, you know what? Maybe first of all, I want to thank all the members of the press for being here, for sitting through this press conference, and you know, for the hard work you do to cover this campaign. I would make an observation about the last question. You know, when Ross Perot ran, the press was saying he can't win. And that actually, you know, Amaryllis told the story that the average coming out of the exit polls, he only won 19% of the vote. But the average coming out of the exit polls was 36%. And they said, the people said, we didn't vote for him because we didn't think he could win. If those people who wanted to vote for him had voted for him, he would have won. But they didn't, because they were told by the press that it's a lost cause, it's a wasted vote. And we're fighting a much more, you know, Ross Perot was running at a time when the press was not particularly partisan. He appeared, you know, I remember he was on Larry King, which is the biggest show at that time, night after night after night. He was on ABC, NBC, CBS. He was welcomed on all the networks. But today, all the networks are very, very partisan. And, you know, in 18 months, ABC has never allowed me on for a single interview. NBC, not a single interview. CBS, and we've asked again and again and again to let me on. CBS, Major Garrett just did the first interview in 18 months 3 days ago. On CNN, I've been on MSNBC. We've asked repeatedly. They will not let me on to do it, even a taped interview. None of them will. The interview I did with CBS was taped. I've done only one live interview on all of the networks, including CNN and MSNBC and all the, you know, the airwave networks. And that was Erin Burnett, which went viral. And then I did 2 taped interviews with Michael Smerconish and the one with Major Garrett, and that's it. In 18 months, I have not been allowed on the major platforms that we talk to, through which we talk to the American people. And those platforms are also every day telling the American public he can't win. And my favorability ratings are higher than President Trump's and President Biden's. In every poll that puts me in a head-to-head race against President Trump, I win. In every poll that puts me in a head-to-head race against President Biden, I win. And now, we've done polling that show I have a 10-point advantage over Vice President Harris in a race against Donald Trump in a head-to-head race. So, a lot of, and we've also been told by the mainstream media that the same thing, that the ballot access was insurmountable. So don't pay attention to him. Don't pay attention to his campaign. We're offering the American public a different view that is not the corporate view, the corporate control view that's coming from the Republican and Democratic Party. We're offering them the only ones offering a vision of hope. Both other candidates are offering further division, polarization, demonization of the other side, of other Americans, finger pointing, and this very toxic polarization in our country that the media is feeding into. And they're telling the American public, you have no choice but more of the same. President Trump has had a chance. President Biden has a chance. Both of them made the polarization worse. Both of them made the debt worse, the war machine, the chronic disease epidemic. And the media, it's almost like they see their function as, Nicole talked a minute ago about the headwinds that we operate against. We expect unfair treatment. We expect egregious treatment from the political parties, but also from the mainstream media. And, I grew up in a household in which journalists were revered. My father's, the big award named after my father by the RFK Memorial is the Journalism Award. I grew up in my household knowing some of the greatest journalists of our time, and revering journalism as a noble profession that was a critical guardian of democracy. That it was the fourth estate. It was the uncorruptible agency that kept democracy honest, that treated every person with dignity and any agglomeration of power with fear or skepticism. And I would personally like to see some more of that from this campaign. There's an ethical precept in journalism that says before a jury trial, you don't tell people you don't tell the people who you think is guilty. You let the jury decide. And I would say in this case, there's a similar imperative that says that in a democracy, you should let the public decide. You should give everybody a platform and everybody a fair chance. And I think if Americans believe that I could win, I would win. And they largely don't believe that because what they are hearing from the press day after day, he can't do ballot access, he'll never make it, it's insurmountable, he can't win this election, why is he bothering? And so anyway, I would just leave people with that thought. And again, with my gratitude to all of you for coming out and covering this event. And thank you again, Nicole, Amaryllis, and Nick, and Paul Rossi, and Stephanie, and the entire team that's out there. These incredible, extraordinary people, state by state, that have shown up day after day after day to make this impossible thing happen. I'm very grateful to all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the press that came today. We will follow up with an email. This was recorded, so we can provide the recording from today, and just appreciate your time. Thanks so much.